so far. And if I've forgotten anyone else's home state, just unmute and let me know.
And Adela Gorodzinski and Patricia Lawrence are online from London, Ontario, Canada.
Welcome. Welcome to our northern neighbor. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the tip about the spacebar, because we couldn't figure out how to unmute ourselves.
Oh, okay. Do you want to be seen? You can.
No,
you can
it's
also...
okay because we're having dinner.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I'd like to begin our discussion this evening because we have a lot of information to share. And I'd like to begin our discussion with the Haggadah. And the Haggadah, of course, is the story, the book that we read that tells the Passover story and describes our exodus from Egypt. And the word Haggadah, if you know Hebrew roots, comes from Agadah, the root which means telling. So it is fitting because it comes from the word telling, and it is telling the Passover story, and it's telling about the exodus from Egypt and the customs and things that we are commanded to do at this time. And as we read through the Haggadah, we come to a section of the Seder that describes the three core symbols of the holiday and what we're supposed to do. And of course, everything in the Haggadah is in order, because the word Seder itself means order. And it has an order of 15 steps that we are to follow in doing our Passover ritual each year. So while some of the things that each of us may choose to do are more modern or more rituals that we've come up with our families, and some of us stick to purely the traditional ways of observing each of these things, it doesn't matter because the order doesn't vary. You can't change the order is the same. And so we're taught that in order to fulfill the obligation of a Seder, we have to mention and talk about three symbols and what they mean. And one of those is the Passover offering, the Pesach it's called, just like the word for Passover is Pesach. And that refers to the shank bone that we have on the Seder plate. The other is the bread of affliction, which is the matzah. And the third is the bitter herbs, the maror. So an interesting thing about the Passover Haggadah, as I shared with you today, is that the word comes from the Hebrew agadah, or telling. And the Haggadah is called an open text. And this is important to know because, for as many people as are on the screen tonight, you can have a different Haggadah for each of you. And you could write your own. You could buy one that's, a traditional one that you like. You could use the Manischewitz Haggadah, which is like a traditional, been around forever, or you could find the Freedom Haggadah. You could find the new Haggadah, the family Haggadah, the 20-minute Seder. There are literally thousands, if not more, Haggadot out there. And what we know and why that is, why there's not one official one. If you were to say, I'd like to purchase the official Haggadah for Passover, there isn't one official one because the Haggadah is what's called an open text. Just the way the prayer books that we use in our synagogues are called open texts. You can add to them, you can put in a reading that you really like, you can, have a couple of different inspirational things, you can put in a meditation, all of that. But the order of the service in a prayer book or in the Haggadah will not change from the order it is. In other words, if you have a prayer book, although it's an open text and you might find some lovely readings that you'd like to include if you were putting together your own Siddur, or your congregation was maybe writing their own, putting together a Siddur, you couldn't say, I think we should start with the Shema. Why don't we start with that first? You can't just move the parts around, just like you can't say, let's begin our Seder with Elijah's cup. We'll do that first. You have to follow the set order. And so I thought that you would be very well educated Passover observers if you knew that. So I was throwing that in as a bonus, it's just an extra. And so the 15 steps are fixed. Keeping our three symbols in mind are our Pesach, the shank bone, our matzah, our bread of affliction, and the maror, the bitter herbs, I do have a question, and in a moment I'm going to ask Nina maybe if you can unmute people as they wish to speak, which is, I have two questions for discussion. Which of the three symbols hold the most meaning for you, and why that particular one? So which of those, the shank bone, the matzah, or the bitter herbs, speaks to you particularly, and why? And you just have to raise your hand and we'll unmute you, and then you can feel free to share. And Nina, feel free to share also. Paula?
I'll start off.
Okay. I think she's talking, but she's muted. Paula.
I said, or you can press the space bar.
Oh, you can press the space bar.
That's
Okay.
right, I forgot about that.
Okay.
So I was going to say the shank bone, and the reason it has the most meaning for me is that I'm a vegetarian, and we make a substitute for it. But I can get to that when Reb Deb wants to. I'll give the other people a chance to press their space bars and say something.
So feel free to press your space bar and jump in.
Well, if no one's jumping in, I could share what I do. That's different. So we've been vegetarians in my house forever. And so the shank bone is particularly weird to us. So we added this thing from a Haggadah called the Haggadah for the Liberated Lamb. And I'm going to share it with you. I like it very much. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we read this and we put, people use all kinds of different stuff. You can place, like this says olives, grapes, and grains of unfermented barley, and I'll read why. Some people put all kinds of different stuff that would represent to them a Passover offering. So as vegetarians, in place of the shank bone, we place olives, grapes, and grains of unfermented barley, which symbolize the commandments of compassion for the oppressed found in the Bible. We use olives to commemorate the commandment to leave the second shaking of the olive trees for the poor. We use grapes to commemorate the commandment to leave the second shaking of the grapevines for the poor, from Deuteronomy 24:20. And we use grains of unfermented barley or other unleavened or unfermented grains to commemorate the commandment not to muzzle the ox when it treads out the corn in the fields. In other words, to recognize the natural appetites of the animal and not interfere with them. This commandment is considered to be the oldest extant concept of animal rights and enshrines the dignity and rights of the animal. So I really like this. I think it adds an element to our Seder of thinking about the oppressed in a different way. That's why I like it.
That's such a nice thing. My husband is a vegan, and so this is something that's particularly meaningful. We don't use this that you've read, but we use a turnip on the Seder plate because that's another thing that you can use if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, so that you're not using an animal, product on the Seder plate.
We use beetroot.
A beet. Yeah.
What did she say?
We use beets.
A beetroot, she said.
A beetroot, yeah.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah. I like the matzah just because it just has such significance in terms of not having time, and in fact it has also symbolism of the crossing of the sea because it had to go with them and not get wet. It just was. So to me, that was like you know what it is. It's not just a point in time. Simply, actually, it went with them on the journey, right? It started in Egypt, it went through the sea, and then they had at the end. I kind of like that kind of journeying type of symbolism.
So it was traveling food.
Yeah.
Good traveling food. Stick it in your pouch and you're on the way. Anybody else have a favorite of those three? Diane?
Okay, probably the matzah, but pretty close between the matzah and the bitter herbs. The Pesach, frankly, I'm not real connected to the meaning of it, whether it's the passing over, but, if you can refresh us, that would be helpful to me. Mm-hmm. But the most basic one, I think, is the matzah that is most, easy to associate with Passover and kind of inseparable. But also the idea of the bread of affliction and the bitterness. This is from the Maror. The two, I think, are very the symbolism is kind of similar to me. And if the differences are distinct, I would be interested in someone sharing that. But especially living in the South, as I have for the last 30 some years, where we had so many enslaved here, affliction and slavery, are topics that are kind of always around.
That's so interesting. I'm just thinking what it would be for me, because I only put this together but didn't think about what my answers would be. And I think it would also be the matzah. And the reason I say that is that it is not puffed up. It's very humble, the matzah. And so it is an inspiration to remember our humility in the face of everything that goes on in the world and the other people we come in contact with and how we deal with them, and to be properly humble. In the study of Musar, Jewish Musar, which is the ethics of everyday living, we're told to find a balance in everything we do. And how do you find the right balance in humility? And here we have the matzah that's completely flattened, and not at all puffed up. And it sits in our midst to remind us of something we need to look at in ourselves. So the matzah for me. I vote for the matzah. One vote for the matzah on my side. Anyone else?
By the way, I love that symbolism. I haven't heard that before. I love that. Yeah.
Thank you. So my other question is, if you could add another symbol to the Seder plate, even though really you can't, but because it's a closed thing. But if you could add another symbol that had deep meaning for you, something that's not already on the plate, what would it be, and why would you put it there? Bridget.
Well, it's already added often, but I thought I would mention the orange on the Seder plate, which I guess as some of you know about. And what I find especially interesting about it is that the original story got changed. So the story people tell about it is not what happened, which on the one hand you could say, oh, wow, what a midrash. That's so interesting. On the other hand, it covered over the origin, which had to do with gays and lesbians. So
right,
just the whole story is fascinating to me. And I love telling people what the original story was, since they usually know the later version of it.
Version B, right?
Right.
The second iteration,
Right.
of the orange. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? What would you add to that Seder plate? You have poetic license to do what you want, to create whatever you want.
We added an artichoke. It was the same, similar idea as the orange. An artichoke is all together, connected to the heart of the artichoke are all the leaves.
Nice.
And different shapes, different sizes. Just like Am Israel is all made out of different versions of Judaism.
That's beautiful. That's really, really nice. I like that. And it's all held together. It all is bound together. Beautiful. Anybody else?
I would say that, it just came to mind, because I've never been asked this question, is the pomegranate. I was thinking, what would it be? Because the pomegranate has 613 seeds, midrashic, 613 seeds, and also it could really represent the family of Jews, the diaspora, everyone. So I think the pomegranate. If we could get them in April, in March, April.
Yeah, beautiful. That's a great one also. What else? What other things might you add to the Seder plate? If you could add whatever you wanted.
We've added a fair trade chocolate wrapper as a reminder that there is still slavery that does exist,
Yes.
modern slavery, and to hope that that slavery would cease and individuals get a fair pay for the goods that they produce.
Beautiful. Thank you, Adela. Anybody else want to add something to your Seder plate? Paula.
This is actually in response to the first question and your remark about the matzah being humble. And it's interesting that we'll be celebrating Passover at this time. the virus, which is causing us to go back to basics. And you know, here where I am, you cannot buy flour right now. I mean, everybody has stocked up on flour. You cannot buy flour, and you cannot buy a thermometer. You cannot buy, even on Amazon.
I know.
I just got one today from eBay. So I just wanted to bring that connection to somewhat of a silver lining in what's happening, is that we are being compelled to be very humble and to go back to basics.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you. Anybody
May
else before we?
May I add
Yeah.
to that thought, Rebecca? Excellent point, Paula. And I just like to add that I was thinking the same thing, like, you know, should I cut out pictures of the things? Because we all can't get things. So just draw a picture and cut it out, whatever. We're all going to have virtual Seders. It's very interesting that someone go back to basics about what is it about. It's about bringing the family together and appreciate Jewish tradition and remembering and you know, remembering and, you know, coming together about, you know, what are our responsibilities as Jews in general. I think it's interesting how this has kind of gotten us back, I think, to the basic, right, core of the Seder. And I think, Nina, you said the first, or someone said, called the very beginning, that the first time your family's been together because there's no excuse not to. Nina, you said that. I mean, so that's, yeah.
And we are in exile. I mean, we truly are in exile. And so how do you create a ritual when you're in exile? And how do you draw people in to create community? All of this, you know, is part of our attempt tonight to offer this. So I'd like to move on a little bit because we'll see where this takes us next. We have a reading, and which we did on substituting the shank bone for a vegan or vegetarian item. And I wanted to go on to talk about hametz, the hametz. In addition to our physical preparations for Pesach, which may be somewhat stressed this year, we cannot neglect the spiritual preparation. You know, as we clean our homes and prepare and look for crumbs and carry the feather in the candle and sweep out the corners of all the hametz, what about getting our hearts and minds ready? Because that's something that even though we don't have the supplies, we can do. We can create the kavanah, the intention to do that. And that's as important as preparing our physical surroundings. Now, our booklet has a lovely poem on the Pesach cleaning that it has a poem on this ritual written by Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb. And I think everyone has the booklet, so you can read this at your leisure. If you like, I'm going to pull, you know, something out of there that I wanted to focus on. And I will offer that Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb is a colleague of mine from the Jewish Renewal Movement, and I'm ordained a rabbi through the Jewish Renewal Movement as well. And Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb was the first woman ordained a rabbi in the Jewish Renewal Movement by Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who was the founder and leader of the movement. So she carries a lot of status out there in the world, not just in Jewish Renewal, but is very well known. And she wrote a lovely poem, and she talks about searching the high and low places inside ourselves as we search for hametz. And so I'm you know, wondering what you are searching for as you prepare for Pesach. You know, you can share or choose to keep it to yourself, that's okay. But I'm wondering, you know, what you are searching for as you prepare for Pesach. And I don't know if anyone would be willing to share. I mean, I'm certainly happy to do so, but would any others care to share? Bridget, thank you.
Bridget's mute, hold on. There, wait.
Whole question, which is I'm not sure where this booklet is.
Oh, would you like me to put it up for you on the thing?
Are you sharing it on the screen?
I can, if you
can.
like.
Yeah,
okay.
I just pulled the one line out of it.
It's long, but here. Can you see it?
Sent out or something like that?
Yeah. When you registered for this, it was sent out. I can make sure that you get one after this as well.
Okay. Well, if we got it when we registered, then no worries. I I must have missed that.
Yeah, here in the right-hand column as you're facing it,
Yeah.
it says, washing our hands, we say a blessing over water. We light a candle and search in the listening silence. Search the high places and the low places inside you. Search the attic and the basement, the crevices and the crannies, the corners of unused rooms. So I'm referencing searching the high places and the low places inside ourselves, and wondering how we would do that to prepare for Pesach ourselves.
Well, I'll just say that I don't know if it's a high place or a low place, maybe a low place. But I feel so strange to know I'm not going to go anywhere or have anybody come to my house for Seder. And I don't even know what to say about it. It's just, it's so incredibly strange. And I'm not fully observant about not using, electricity and so on a Chag, but my son is, who's 22 and is in our house. So we're not going to be, going online with anybody, and it all just feels incredibly strange.
But you could go online with us because we're holding our Seder for Chai Mitzvah next Monday.
Oh, okay.
So you could attend that virtually and at least have
Yeah.
something.
Thank you. I guess what I mean is, though, my family, it's just going to be us, and we usually don't have a Seder, just three of us, I mean, we certainly can, but it feels very strange.
Yeah. Anybody else like to talk about the high and low places, what it might mean? Paula?
Spacebar.
Yeah. I'm trying to take advantage of this quiet time, to set aside time every day to be more introspective and to look at my own high and low places, and to journal and do other creative activities around that. So yeah, I read that part in the handbook and really was moved by it. So I'm glad that we're discussing it.
Thank you. Anybody else, high and low places? Marilyn?
Okay. Yeah. That sentence made me think of the High Holy Days, when you're looking for the good things you did and the bad things you did, the good places you were at, the bad places you're at, and what you're always talking about, Mitzrayim, and getting to a better place and all. So that made me think of that.
Mm-hmm. That's very creative. I like that. Thank you. Anybody else? The high places and the low places?
You can use that, by the way.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Adela. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think especially this year, but it usually Pesach is like it's a place to go to in terms of if I'm feeling lost or confused or very sad. Pesach is like it's a cornerstone that I can go to, and it means, how do I connect with my people, with my roots in ritual and in tradition? And this year is going to be especially deeper because the connection is harder to achieve since we're not going to be physically with our loved ones. Some of us are lucky to have a partner, a spouse. Other people are going to be completely physically alone.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things I wanted to add in. I think that, first of all, that's amazing. And it reminded me of what I said about we don't get to be together physically a lot because my family is spread on the two coasts. And I'm kind of happy that we're going to be able to have a virtual Seder because we'll all be together. But the other thing I wanted to say was a couple of things we were talking about, bringing different rituals or different traditions in. And I don't know if anybody has like things they've done just themselves in their house. I was going to share one that I always do and two that I read about that I think would be fun. One is, and I always loved Bidikat Chametz since I was a little girl, because I lived in a tiny apartment, but we would go to my cousins in Philadelphia who had a townhouse, and we'd have a real candle, and we'd go up the back stairs, and it was just really fun. So we used to do it with my kids when they were little, but instead of burning the chametz in the morning of the next day, we would feed the crumbs to the birds, because you know, we didn't want to waste the food, and we wanted to help the animals. So that was like a tradition. If anybody has traditions they want to bring in, I thought that might be interesting to share. Also, there are two things. One is inspired by this poem, which is to take the things that are the Mitzrayim in your pockets or in your heart, the things that you, like you said, Marilyn, like looking back on the year, thinking of it, like, because Passover is one of the, there were like 4 Rosh Hashanahs, Reb Deb can explain that to you, but it is a time of renewal and starting. And if you take the things that you want to get rid of, that you want to work on getting out of yourself, and write them down, and then you can burn the paper. That's sort of like a symbolic getting rid of them. Or one that I like better is getting the kind of paper that has seeds in it, like seeded paper, and writing what you're aspiring to the next year, you know, starting now, and planting it, and then letting those good aspirations grow.
That was my favorite one of the ones you told me. I just loved that one when we were talking about that the other day. I really did.
I'll send a link to where you can order that paper, because none of us are going anywhere.
Right. Paula, please. Yeah.
And also, if you can't order the paper, you can make your own seeded paper by using toilet paper and make a little paste of flour and water and just wet the toilet paper and put some seeds on it. So
now I know why people are hoarding toilet paper, because they all want to do this. That's great to know. That's wonderful.
So other Hametz rituals, or if not, we'll go a little further into this journey and talk about some other stuff. Well, yeah, please, Diane.
Okay, so I never have thought of Passover as being an introspective holiday. I have never been exposed to that idea before this very moment here. To me, I think of it more as a holiday where we, you know, we call our tradition in a very strong manner. You know, a story is louder than it is normally, you know, on a Friday night at services or whatever. And it's more, it's you know, this idea that it's introspective is a new one to me, but it sounds like maybe not to you all. So
I agree. I would say, Diane, I just really resonate with that, because I was, when everyone was answering, like, wow. And when you asked the question, Reb Deb, I had not even thought of that, because you're right. It's usually a connecting kind of traditional Jewish, you know, that we do it. We're Jewish. We think about tradition and history, but not about ourselves so much. And I agree with that. So I think it's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, it's very much I think for me, a holiday of growth and transition, because we're moving from a tight and narrow place, and we have to grow in order to burst out of that, you know, in order to like make our way out of the tight space that's holding us back. We need to figure out how to make that space bigger so that we can get out and we can sort of burst free of what's holding us back. So I'll add to that a little bit. I'm going to add another sort of thought from Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach's Haggadah, and it really touches upon what we're talking about right now. So in his Haggadah, it says, between redemption and slavery is mashahu, a tiny spot or speck. Real redemption comes when we walk around with a candle and find this tiny trait that holds us back from being all that we could be. This little trait that is ruining us. And when we find it, we burn it. Which to me is like, just like, wow, you know? And what I'd ask you to do, and you don't need to share it, but for something for your personal time, is to think about where is your, or what is your mashahu? You know, what holds you back from reaching your full potential? And how can you find it and burn it so that you're free? You know, that fire that you burn it with lights the way to a bigger place for you. So if anyone has any comments on that, you don't have to make them personal.
Adela has her hand up. I can see Adela has her hand up.
Yeah, it's Patricia here. As a convert to Judaism from Roman Catholicism, in the Catholic tradition, it's the one time of year. Easter time is the one time of year when you're meant to go confess your sins, to get rid of the bad in you, and to try to do better in the future. And I think that this is something for me, the idea of getting rid of the stuff we don't need within ourselves, the things that don't serve us. It's really is a time for introspection, and that's one of the things that's important for me.
Interestingly, as you mentioned that, next week I'm doing an interfaith Passover Easter teaching for one of the local organizations here. And, I think it's going to be very interesting to look at these traditions from a multi-faith perspective and see what we come up with. So thank you for mentioning that.
May I ask a question? I'm just thinking that, Passover is kind of the Exodus, right? The main, with a big E, capital E.
The big Exodus.
But every service, we all know we have Michamocha, right? We have that, which is the same symbolism, but it's like small. I'm just wondering, is there any play between the two where we have every single service we have this, right? That we're singing Michamocha, who is like God, and the sea split. And here we have the big reenactment.
Well, we also have, not only the Michamocha in every service, we've got in every service Az Yashir Moshe, the crossing of the Sea of Reeds. Every day we have that as part of the service. And also in the Kiddush, we reference, that we've been freed, the liberation. So, liberation and redemption. I mean, so those are themes of who we are. And I think they show up in our liturgy throughout. They are a woven thread throughout our liturgy, so that we never forget who we are, where we came from, and who's responsible for it. That's what it says to me. I mean, that, you can be, you can say you're as free as you want and you've done, everything you can, and look what you've created for yourself. But, in my opinion, and only in my opinion, we're here by God's good graces, because that's where we've been created from, and what we do with that, is our responsibility. But we're here. And, so I think when we look at Michamocha every week, we gather every week at the shore of the Sea of Reeds, and we cross it again, and we have that opportunity to redeem ourselves and to do teshuvah, and to really open ourselves up into a broader place every single time we do Michamocha. What a gift is that, in my opinion. That is a gift we're given every week through the liturgy. And every day we stand at the shores of that sea, and we thank God for that liberating experience, where it's an experience of crossing over. We get to cross over from slavery to freedom, from a tightness to an expansiveness. We get to be somebody else if we want to. We get to move beyond ourselves and explore our full potential. That's my rabbinic sermon done. If anybody wants to add anything to that, feel free.
I like to refer back to where you said there is a mashu in between the redemption and the slavery. And that mashu sometimes can be filled with anxiety, because we really don't know where to go or how to be really free.
I'm shaking my head. I don't know, I guess you can't see that, but I'm like shaking my head as you're saying that. Yeah, in agreement with you. And it's a very scary place to be. If you think of being in Mitzrayim, it's a dark place. You can't see. You don't know what's going to be at the end of the tunnel. You don't know when the tunnel's going to end. That's pretty anxiety producing. And we're in Mitzrayim. We currently sit in Mitzrayim as we speak. We don't know where the end of the tunnel is.
More than in many years, yes.
Yeah. So, we're living this now.
But isn't it true though that all of us have experienced in our lives, I personally have, that most growth comes from those places, whether we like it or not. I mean, no one wants to say, I want to be in their place. I mean, we all don't say that. But when we are, because of circumstances, and this circumstance, and then this one's kind of thrust upon us, and other circumstances in our lives, we all have them, right? Have had them, I have them. That's what really produces the strength and the new perspective and the new, right? I mean, so the irony is, isn't it, that the narrowness is part of the ride, so to speak. Not the ride, but
So maybe you can't get to expansiveness without going through a narrow place. Maybe, you know.
I haven't experienced that. Has anyone else like been able? I don't know how to do it. I wish I did.
Great that you said that, because the one thing I always hoped for my children was that somehow they could grow without any pain. You can't.
So I know you talked a little bit about the chametz in your, you know, and I love those, and I wanted to look at a couple of rituals for the Seder table and see what we can do with those. So I have 3 that I'd like to talk about, and the first one is, it's almost ironic to mention this as the first one, orchatz, the washing of the hands.
I have the funniest thing to share with you. Just keep talking. You'll see it on the screen in a minute.
Okay. So orchatz, according to most traditions, there's no blessing recited at this point in the Seder. You know, normally we'll do al netilat yadayim for the washing of the hands, you know, at a meal or something. This is a silent hand washing ritual, which is unlike the traditional one, where the hands are washed and the blessings recited. So my question is, what have you done with your hands in the past year that makes you think of the value of your hands? How have your hands been called into service over the past year that has brought their value to the forefront?
I can start. So when I think about that, I think of things I've created, either, you know, through work because I do design, or through cooking to share with people. But what those things I don't really think of as so wonderful. What I think of right away, my top priority, I think of my grandchildren, and when they put their arms up and they want you to pick them up, and you pick them up, that to me is like the greatest use of hands.
So that's a great service you put your hands to do all the time, right? Your hands and your arms, right?
Right. But to me, just that act, I don't know, it involves hands, and it just feels like the most important.
Anybody else? What have you used your hands for this year that has been in the service of, you know, making it a better place, or has elevated your action to a higher level? Marilyn, you have, because you work with us on the Hunger Project. So you've used your hands. Maybe you can share with us a little bit about that. Not to put you on the spot, but.
I'm on the spot. Yes, the 2 hunger projects that we do, preparing food for a shelter, and then preparing prepackaged foods that include grains. That's a package that can be used to feed 10 people. It's a small quart bag that we donate to our local social services. And 1 package of this with water added makes a meal for 10 people. So when people get together and there's 10 of us or 15 of us and we prepare 100 packages, that's preparing 1,000 meals. So yeah, we use our hands for that. And our other one project is we prepare salads and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for a shelter, as well as doing collections that we do for the shelter of socks and hats and scarves and things like that. And
so we use our hands a lot, right?
As well as for collecting gifts for the kids, for local kids for Christmas and Hanukkah and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, didn't want to let you forget, because our congregation is very active in terms of working with our hands. What do other people do? What else do you do with your hands? It doesn't have to be feeding the hungry. Diane, is your hand up? Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so one of the things that I've used my hands for is working with Moms Demand Action. And there's specifically something called the GSAN, the Gun Sense Action Network.
Mm-hmm.
And you use your computer and you use your phone, and you are using your hands to flap around to different screens. It's not very hard, it's very simple, but you have an automatic dialer, and you are calling people that have signed up to be in the movement to just try to help engage them in the movement by telling them what events are coming up, or, you know, we might be calling to try to get them to come out to an advocacy day, like, you know, to help things happen, like maybe they've, you know, like what's happened in Virginia. So, you know, that's something I feel good about, and the way I use my hands. And the other thing is, just like you were saying, helping others, not so much the organized things, a little bit there. But, and this is something that under the current circumstances with the pandemic, I hope to do more of, but the idea of calling other people, especially people that might be by themselves or elderly, to check on them. You know, the hands are good, although a lot of that stuff you can do with the voice now. But so that was something I feel really good about is just calling to check on. I haven't done enough of it, and I'm hoping right now, as of today, hoping to do more of it, and making notes of that.
Thank you. Other people, how are you using your hands for an elevating purpose? Paula?
Well, I've been using my hands for the past several years to, this is more personal and less philanthropic than we've been talking about. But I've been using my hands to develop my artwork.
Nice.
And doing visual journaling and watercolor painting. And it's really changed my connection to the world and to others and to myself. And it's just been a real gift to be able to engage in something that I had grown up believing was frivolous or for others, and to really deeply feeling the value of it.
Thank you. So beyond hands and elevating things, we have another ritual that we engage in at the Seder table.
Before you do that, I have a slightly of a joke. I don't mean to, I mean, I think what we talked about was so meaningful, but I think this is really funny and I want to share it.
Go ahead, you found it, go ahead.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
2020 Passover Seder, Kadesh Urachatz, Karpatz Urachatz. We're going to wash our hands all the time. And I just thought it was really funny. My daughter sent that to me.
That's adorable. So we have another, maybe we can, I was going to say, we can, another ritual, which is a modern ritual, probably about almost 45 years old now.
I'm sorry, Rebecca, can I just make a comment on?
Yes, sure, I'm sorry.
Apologies, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. Nina, I just want to say something about that, because I started reading Camus' The Plague, because it's this book, right? And my husband said that this anti-Semitism, that's coming up about COVID right now, he's told me that, he's saying that he read that the reason why anti-Semitism was around during the plague was because Jews washed their hands ritually. Yeah. And they didn't get the plague as much as everybody else did, which is, it goes directly into your
exactly
order. Sorry, I just want to share that.
Yeah,
that's a great point. I'm glad that you made that point. That's the second time this book has come up today in my work. I've been teaching all day. We have the ritual of Miriam's Cup, which is about a 45-year-old, new ritual. And, it's that Miriam's cup is filled with water because the tradition says that Miriam was given the gift of a well from God, and that well of living waters traveled with the Israelites through the desert on their journey until Miriam died. And when she died, the well dried up. So a suggested ritual for Miriam's cup would be for each person to pour a little bit of water into Miriam's cup that's on the table. And as they do, to say the name of a woman who has nurtured them along their journey this year. I pour this water in honor of my mother, Estelle Weinberger, who has nurtured my journey throughout my life and in every year. to become the best that I could be, and who taught me to do what I love and to love what I do. So that would be my contribution to that. But, you know, if anyone would like to add a contribution to that in terms of pouring the water, Marilyn, go ahead. Your hand was up first.
Yes, I have to say, I would say for this year, I would have to say Reb Deb.
Thank you.
Yes, because of the many things that I learn with her and from her, and the time we spend together, and what she does for our community, etc. So, not self-serving. It just was the right answer at the right time.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
From my heart. Thank you. Would anyone like to add to the Kos Miriam? And if not, it's something to think about maybe for incorporating into your Seder, because I wanted to also, it would not be Passover without mentioning Kos Eliyahu, Elijah, the prophet, and the cup of Elijah, who, you know, Elijah is known for, he was the miracle man, you know, and we welcome Elijah at every Seder table. He attends every Brit Milah, circumcision, I know because my husband is a Moyle, and he's with us at the close of Shabbat every week for Havdalah. Eliyahu Hanavi, you know, that song is part of the weekly ritual. And so in addition to the 4 traditional cups of wine that we drink at Passover, there's another cup on the table, which is Elijah's cup. And it's said that he visits every Seder. This year he's going to be very restricted, so this will not happen. But I wanted to share a ritual that I did read about. There's a Hasidic Rebbe whose name is Naftali Horowitz, who 16th, 17th century used to invite all his Seder guests to pour a drop from their cup of wine into Elijah's cup that was on the table. And this symbolized the need for each person to make a personal contribution to bring about God's redemption in the world. And redemption, and especially now, I mean, I can't stress it more, begins with the efforts of each one of us. Each one of us has the power to bring a drop of redemption into the world with our human efforts. And I know, Nina, you wanted to share with us the 5th cup. Nina has a beautiful reading to share about that 5th cup, which relates to our future redemption, for which we will need a lot of help. You're muted.
Okay, sorry. I didn't realize I was muted. So we do this at our Seder. You can do it after the 4th cup, or you can do it before Elijah's cup. It's a beautiful 5th cup. And this is what we read before we pour in our wine. The 5th child, the one who cannot ask. On this night, we remember a 5th child. This is the child of the Shoah, Holocaust, who did not survive to ask. Therefore, we ask for that child. Why? We answer that child's question with silence. In silence, we remember that dark time. In silence, we remember that Jews preserved their image of God in the struggle for life. In silence, we remember the Seder nights spent in the forests, ghettos, and camps. We remember the Seder night when the Warsaw Ghetto rose in revolt. We remember with reverence and love the 6 million of our people who perished at the hands of a tyrant more wicked than Pharaoh, who enslaved our fathers in Egypt. And then we take Elijah's cup, and in silence let us pass the cup of Elijah, the cup of the final redemption yet to be. We remember our people's return to the land of Israel, the beginning of our redemption. Let us each fill Elijah's cup with some of our wine, expressing the hope that through our efforts we will bring the redemption closer.
Thank you. That's a beautiful tradition. Really is a beautiful tradition that we have. And, you know, yes, Adela, please. She's muted.
Yeah, it's Patricia here. Adela's just doing something.
She's going, okay, got it.
Yeah, we have the same reading, although in later years, we've skipped the final paragraph and placed the 5th cup after the 4 children, because we have another cup, the cup of Ruth, which we juxtapose with Elijah's cup to involve converts and justice.
That's beautiful. Could you share that reading with us? Because we'd love to incorporate it in our model Seder. I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah, are you able to send that to us before next week? That would be wonderful.
Possibly, I'll try and do that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So I wanted to ask, before we close, if anyone had any special traditions, such as that one, that you might want to share that you do, that we could consider, incorporating into our model Seder, into our Seder next week. Anybody in particular, have anything that leaps out at you? And, if you think of something even after the call and you can send it to Nina, that would be great. I mean, just because we're looking for things that are different.
Nice to share our traditions. What I was going to say is we'll send a follow-up email with these things if you want them. You can have them for your Seder. And it's just so nice to share. So if you could send us I love that, Ruth, cup and anything else that, you'd love to incorporate, we'll have a really interesting, traditional and yet modern model Seder next week.
And everyone is invited. If you haven't signed up and you'd like to join us next Monday, we'll be doing a format like this, 1 hour, and going through the Seder rituals and some readings and really enjoying that together. I'll have the objects in front of me so that I can, hold them up, and we'll actually have the Seder plate and the cup. And, if you're coming, you can bring yours, and that would be very nice. Yes, Bridget.
I have a question. Do you have any idea how many people are going to come? I'm just imagining what an online Seder is like.
What do we have, about 10 so far?
Okay.
We have 13, I think. 13, but there were 25 people signed up for this, and as you can see, there are not 20.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
It should be, I think it will be a good size for interactive. I don't think it's going to be overwhelming.
Thank you.
We've covered a lot of ground tonight in everything we've done here, and hopefully we've offered some ideas to you, and you've offered some to us that can be incorporated into our own Seders and, through the group sharing that we did. And I hope that many of you would consider joining us next week. It will be an open text Seder. So you know what that means? That means new traditions are welcome. New rituals are welcome along with the traditional ones. And also, if you are going to join us, or even if you're not, think about this for your own Seders, however you're holding them. It's the 50th anniversary of Earth Day around the world at this time of Pesach this year. And so, we'll look forward to hopefully incorporating some Earth Day rituals into our Seder next week. Paula?
Also, would it be possible for you to share the information about your meals for 10 in the port bag? That seems very useful at this time.
Oh, our food project? Yes. Yeah. Let me make a note of that. Okay. And you have her contact, right, Nina?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say also at the end of Passover, we have a tradition that might not be one that we have this year, but you might do it virtually. My friends and I, for 20 years, have been getting together and eating our disgusting Passover leftovers at the end of the year. our half-eaten matzo lasagna and our leftover, stuff. It started spontaneously, and now it's become a thing.
Something to consider for sure. Definitely.
Things carry on as they are. We'll be eating last year's leftovers that are still in the freezer.
That's right. That is true.
So thank you everyone for joining us. This has been, for me, wonderful to have met you and to have two of my friends on the call in addition to everyone else who's here. And I want to just wish everyone a sweet Pesach, and may you be safe and may you be well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Meet you all.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thank you.
Take care. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.